of my house. I don't want a poor man here.
How can you do this to me? I am your father.
He threw his own father out for being poor, not knowing the old man still owned the ground beneath his feet. Desmond was 38 years old, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and a smile that had learned to curve only when cameras were watching. He wasn't born in luxury. No, Desmond was born in struggle, but in that struggle was a fire that burned away every memory he considered shameful. His laughter now came in boardrooms. His handshakes sealed million-naira deals, and his confidence could silence a room full of doubters. He had married success when he had nothing but hunger. The morning was too bright for the darkness brewing in Desmond's heart. Sunlight poured over his Lekki mansion like liquid gold, bouncing off white tiles so clean they reflected clouds. The black SUV in the driveway gleamed like a trophy, polished, proud, untouchable. Staff moved through the compound in quiet precision. Perfection was no longer a goal, it was his religion. The gardener trimmed hedges into geometric shapes. The gateman stood at attention in a crisp uniform. Everything had its place. Everything obeyed. Then came the shadow. A frail figure appeared at the gate, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. Brown uniform faded from years and sun. Boots worn thin at the soles. Laces knotted where they'd broken. A small leather suitcase sat beside him, scratched and old. On his head, a military beret sat slightly crooked, as if time itself had tilted it. His face was weathered like ancient wood, lines carved deep by sacrifice, eyes still sharp despite the trembling hands. It was Chief Emmanuel Nwosu, a decorated war veteran, a man whose hands once gripped rifles in defense of a nation, but now shook when holding a cup of water. A father whose heart had carried his son's name through minefields and midnight missions, through decades of service in distant northern bases where letters took months to arrive. When he opened his mouth to call out, his voice cracked, dry from the long bus journey, hoarse from years of swallowing pride. "My son." Desmond froze mid-step on his marble porch. His hand, which had been adjusting his red polo shirt, stopped in the air. His stomach tightened, as if something rotten had suddenly appeared in his perfect world. The security man, Bayo, looked between them, confusion spreading across his face like a stain. Neighbors slowed their morning walks. A woman holding her child's hand paused at the corner. A street vendor pushing a cart stopped to stare. And before reason could speak, before memory could whisper caution, pride roared. "Who are you?" Desmond's voice came out sharp, cutting through the morning air like broken glass. "What do you want?" The old man's hand trembled as he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. A young Desmond in school uniform, standing beside a much younger soldier in the same brown uniform. "Desmond," the old man whispered, his voice breaking with each syllable. "I came home to see how my son is doing." But Desmond didn't see a father. He saw shame walking on tired legs. He saw poverty in worn boots. He saw everything he'd buried rising from the grave to haunt him in front of his neighbors, his staff, his perfectly crafted new life. His jaw clenched. The veins in his neck pulsed. When his words finally came, they were cold enough to freeze fire. "I don't know you." "Security. Remove this beggar from my gate before he pollutes my compound." The compound fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Emmanuel's eyes, those eyes that had stared down enemy soldiers, that had witnessed horrors and heroism, filled with something worse than pain. Disappointment. Bayo, the security man, shifted uncomfortably. "Oga, but he says he is your..." Did I stutter? Desmond's roar echoed across the estate. I said remove him. What Desmond didn't know, what pride and shame had blinded him from seeing, was that the suitcase at his father's feet contained more than old memories. Hidden beneath the medals and the photographs and the faded military reports was a brown envelope. Inside that envelope were land documents, property titles, and legal papers that told a truth Desmond had never bothered to investigate. The mansion he stood in, the land his empire sat on, the ground beneath his Italian leather shoes. None of it belonged to him. Every square inch was still registered under one name, Chief Emmanuel Nwosu. The old soldier had protected this land through military compensation, held it through decades of service, preserved it for the son who would one day build upon it. He'd come home not to beg, but to finally transfer it properly, father to son, with blessing and pride. But Desmond, blinded by success and poisoned by resentment, was about to kick away the very foundation of everything he owned. Emmanuel took one long, painful look at his son, this stranger in expensive clothes who had once been a little boy drawing pictures of "my daddy the soldier" in crayon. His lips moved in a whisper so soft only heaven heard it. "You have forgotten who you are, my son." Then he turned, slowly, painfully, to leave. His cane tapped against the pristine driveway. His shoulders sagged under the weight of rejection. But Desmond wasn't finished. Rage, shame, and years of buried pain erupted like a volcano. "Wait." The old man paused, hope flickering dangerously in his chest. Desmond strode forward, his face twisted with fury. And then, in one moment that would change everything, in one action that would be captured on camera phones and spread across the nation, in one choice that heaven itself would record for judgment, Desmond's foot connected with his father's suitcase. The suitcase flew open, scattering its contents across the white tiles like broken dreams. Military medals clinked and rolled. Old boots tumbled against the SUV's tire. Papers fluttered like wounded birds. And that photograph, Emmanuel in full military dress, younger, stronger, prouder, crashed face down, glass shattering into a spiderweb of cracks. But before we understand how a son could do this to his father, before we witness the complete unraveling of Desmond's empire, we must go back. Back to a small compound in Ajagunal. Back to a young boy who learned to hate the father he thought had abandoned him. Back to the roots Desmond buried so deep he forgot they were the only thing holding him up. 20 years ago, Desmond was a different boy living in a different world. The Face Me Face You compound in Ajagunal smelled of too many lives crushed into too little space. 10 families shared one corridor. The walls were thin enough to hear your neighbors' arguments, their prayers, their hunger. The compound's single toilet always had a queue. The tap water ran brown most mornings. Rats were so bold they ate from your plate if you turned away. Young Desmond, barely 12 years old, lived in one small room with his mother, Mama Desmond. The room was everything: bedroom, kitchen, sitting room, storage. At night, they pulled out a thin mattress and slept side by side. In the morning, they folded it back against the wall. His mother was a strong woman with tired eyes. She sold pure water by the roadside, carrying heavy bags on her head under the scorching sun. Some days she made 300 naira. Some days she made nothing. But she never stopped trying. "Desmond, wear your uniform. You will be late for school," she would call every morning, her voice hoarse from shouting at customers all day. Desmond's school uniform was a patchwork of shame. The shirt had been white once, but now it was gray from too many washes with cheap soap. The shorts were torn at the knee, poorly stitched with thread that didn't match. His shoes had holes at the bottom. When it rained, water soaked through to his socks. The other children noticed. Children always notice. "Desmond, your Papa Don run away?" They would taunt during break time, laughing with cruel mouths. "Soldier way no send money." Another would add, and the laughter would grow louder. "Now your Mama Day suffer for you. Your Papa Don forget you." Desmond would clench his fists, swallow his tears, and say nothing. What could he say? It felt true. His father had left when Desmond was 8 years old, posted to some northern base with a name Desmond couldn't pronounce. Since then, he was just a ghost in a photograph. That photograph hung on the wall of their room, the only decoration Mama Desmond allowed herself. Emmanuel in full military uniform, chest decorated with medals, standing tall and proud. Young Desmond would stare at that picture and hate it. His father looked so clean, so dignified, so important. Meanwhile, Desmond wore torn uniforms and had no father to defend him when bullies pushed him in the school compound. At night, Mama Desmond would cry softly when she thought Desmond was asleep. He wasn't. He heard everything: her prayers, her questions to God, her whispered name. "Emmanuel, where are you? Why is the money not coming?" Sometimes letters arrived, stamps bearing strange city names: Maiduguri, Yola, Kaduna. Mama Desmond would read them aloud, her voice shaking with hope. "My dear wife, I have sent money through the military accounts office. It should reach you soon. Tell Desmond I am proud of him. Kiss him for me. I miss you both. Your husband, Emmanuel. *L. But the money never came. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. The promises in the letters became ghosts, just like the man who wrote them. Desmond learned to hate those letters. He learned to hate that photograph. And slowly, quietly, he learned to hate the man himself. The narrative Desmond built in his mind was simple and brutal. My father abandoned us. It was easier to believe than the complicated truth. Easier to nurse anger than to hold on to hope. And when his mother fell sick during his 19th year, that anger turned into stone. Mama Desmond had been coughing for months. She ignored it, kept selling pure water, kept praying, kept saying, "I am fine, my son. Don't worry." But one evening, she collapsed in the compound corridor. Blood stained her lips. Neighbors rushed her to the general hospital. The doctor's words were cold and final. Advanced tuberculosis. She needed treatment months ago. Now it's too late. Desmond sat beside her hospital bed, holding her frail hand, watching her fade. "Desmond," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Call your father. Tell him." "Mama, there is no father. It's just us. It has always been just us." "No." Tears rolled down her sunken cheeks. "He loves us. The system swallowed his money. He tried." "Mama, rest. Don't talk." But she wouldn't rest. With her last strength, she whispered one final time, "Emmanuel, I forgive you. Tell him I forgive." And then she was gone. Desmond sat in that hospital chair for hours, staring at nothing. Neighbors came. A pastor prayed. Someone covered his mother's body with a white sheet. Everything felt like a dream painted in gray. The burial happened 3 days later in a cheap cemetery on the outskirts of Lagos. Mama Desmond was laid in the ground with borrowed money and second-hand hymns. Desmond stood there, 19 years old, alone, holding a future that felt like ashes. Emmanuel didn't come. 2 weeks after the burial, he appeared, dusty from travel, eyes wild with grief, uniform wrinkled from the long journey from Liberia, where he'd been stationed on peacekeeping duty. "Where is she? Where is my wife?" Emmanuel's voice cracked as he stood in the empty room that used to be their home. Desmond looked at him with eyes colder than death. "You're 2 weeks late. I came as soon as I heard. The military, they wouldn't release me. The mission." "The mission." Desmond spat the word like poison. "It was always the mission. The country. The uniform. Never us. Never Mama." "Desmond, please understand." "Understand what?" "That you were too busy being a hero to be a husband? That you wrote letters full of promises, but sent nothing? Mama died calling your name, and you weren't there. You were never there." Emmanuel reached out, his hand trembling. "Son, I sent money. Every month through official channels. It never reached you because..." "Lies." Desmond's voice shattered the room. "Mama suffered every single day. She coughed blood and kept selling pure water because you sent nothing. And now you come with excuses?" "Desmond, I loved your mother. Then where were you when she needed you?" Emmanuel had no answer that could bridge the gulf between them. He tried to explain about corrupt officers who stole soldiers' remittances, about bureaucratic systems that swallowed money like black holes, about military protocols that chained him to duty even as his family starved. But Desmond didn't want to hear it. He had spent too many years building a wall around his heart, brick by brick, insult by insult, hunger pang by hunger pang. And now that wall was complete. "Leave," Desmond said quietly. "You have no family here anymore." Emmanuel left that day, shoulders bent under the weight of grief and helplessness. And Desmond locked the door behind him, swearing to himself, "I will never be weak like my mother. I will never wait for anyone. I will make something of myself, and I will never look back." The climb from nothing to something took years, but Desmond attacked it with the fury of a man running from ghosts. He started a computer village in Ikeja, selling phone accessories from a small table. He learned to smile at customers even when they insulted him. He learned to negotiate, to hustle, to survive. Every night, he counted his small profits and planned bigger dreams. That's where he met Ada, a banker's daughter who came to buy a phone charger and stayed to talk. She saw something in Desmond's hunger, something that reminded her of ambition rather than desperation. "You're smart," she told him one evening over cheap shawarma. "You just need opportunity. Opportunity doesn't come to people like me. Then maybe I'll bring it to you." Ada introduced Desmond to her father, Mr. Okonkwo, a wealthy businessman with connections spreading like roots through Lagos. Mr. Okonkwo saw potential in the hungry young man and gave him what he called a small loan, 3 million naira to import electronics. Make me proud, Mr. Okonkwo said, shaking Desmond's hand. And take care of my daughter. The business exploded. Desmond's instincts were sharp. He knew what people wanted before they knew themselves. Within 2 years, he'd paid back the loan and tripled his capital. He expanded into real estate, then construction. Money flowed like a river finally finding the sea. And then came the land. Desmond, I have something for you, Mr. Okonkwo said one afternoon in his office. A prime plot in Lekki, perfect for a young man building his future. I acquired it through the Veteran Affairs Office. They were selling portions to raise funds. It's yours. Build your future here, my son. Desmond didn't ask questions. He didn't verify ownership. He didn't check the documents. Why would he? Mr. Okonkwo had given him everything. Business, legitimacy, even his daughter's hand in marriage. The man was more of a father than his real father had ever been. What Desmond didn't know, what pride and assumption had hidden from him, was that the land had never fully transferred. It remained registered under Chief Emmanuel Nwosu, pending family clearance that required the owner's son to sign. But no one could find the son. The son had disappeared into his new life, his new name, his new identity as a self-made man. Desmond built his mansion on that land. He launched his business empire from its foundation. And with every brick laid, every success achieved, he repeated his new philosophy like a mantra. The past is for the poor. I am a self-made man. He forgot his mother's sacrifice. He buried his father's existence. He convinced himself that he owed nothing to anyone, that his success was purely his own creation. But foundations built on lies are just fancy words for sand. Now, standing on his marble porch that bright morning, watching the old soldier at his gate, all these memories crashed through Desmond's mind like violent waves. He saw his childhood poverty. He felt his mother's absence. He remembered every insult, every hunger pain, every moment of shame. And instead of softening his heart, the memories hardened it into stone. This man took my childhood, Desmond thought, his jaw clenching. He took my mother's happiness. He will not take my dignity. Not here. Not in front of my neighbors. Not in the life I built from nothing. He descended the stairs like judgment itself, each step echoing on Italian marble like a countdown to disaster. The confrontation was about to explode. Emmanuel stood trembling at the gate, hope dying in his eyes as his son approached with fury in every step. Desmond, my son, please. I know it has been many years. Don't call me your son. Desmond's voice cracked like thunder. Staff froze mid-movement. The gateman stepped back as if lightning had struck near his feet. You think you can just appear after 20 years and call me son? Where were you when we were suffering? When my mother was crying every night? When I was wearing torn shoes to school? Emmanuel's voice shook. I was serving Nigeria. I sent money. I wrote letters. Liar. Desmond's finger jabbed toward the old man like a weapon. You abandoned us. You chose uniform over family. And now that I have made something of myself, now you come begging. Begging. Emmanuel's eyes widened, hurt flooding his weathered face. I came to see you, to see how you are. See me? Desmond laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that made neighbors flinch. Look around you, old man. I am not the poor boy you left behind. I am somebody now. And you? You are nothing but a reminder of shame I have buried. Emmanuel reached into his suitcase with trembling hands. Son, I brought your things, the drawings you made for me. Your school reports I kept. But Desmond's rage had become a living thing, beyond reason, beyond mercy. He kicked at the suitcase. The leather case flew open, contents exploding across the pristine white driveway like shrapnel from a bomb. Military medals clinked against the tiles, bronze and silver catching the sunlight, spinning like fallen stars. Old boots tumbled out, one landing near the SUV's tire, the other rolling toward the flower bed. Papers fluttered like wounded birds, letters, reports, drawings in faded crayon. And the framed photograph, Emmanuel in full military dress, younger, stronger, prouder, crashed face down with a sound like breaking bones, glass shattering into a spiderweb pattern across his decorated chest. Emmanuel stumbled backward, his cane scraping desperately against the ground. One hand reached out as if to catch his falling dignity, his falling son, his falling world. His mouth opened in shock, the word why? Forming on his lips, but dying unspoken. His military cap tilted further on his gray head as he lost balance, nearly falling. Desmond stood frozen in his aggressive stance, red polo shirt bright as fresh blood, black jeans pressed and perfect, one foot still raised from the kick. His finger pointed toward the gate like a judge pronouncing sentence. His face was twisted in anger and something uglier, shame disguised as righteousness. Veins pulsed in his neck. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning coolness. "Get out," Desmond roared, his voice carrying across the estate like a siren. "Take your poverty and your fake military service and get out of my property. This is my house, my land, my success. You have no part in it." The compound fell into terrible silence. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The gardener's shears hung motionless in the air. The gateman's hand froze on the metal rail. The old soldier's eyes filled with tears that pride refused to let fall. His voice came out barely above a whisper, but in that whisper was the weight of 25 years of service, of sacrifice, of silent suffering. "This land." He began, then stopped. His hand moved instinctively to his breast pocket where documents lay folded, proof of ownership, proof of love, proof of everything Desmond refused to see. But he didn't pull them out. Instead, he said softly, each word heavy as stone, "You have forgotten who you are, my son." "I am not your son," Desmond spat, his chest heaving. "I am the son my mother raised alone. Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." Mrs. Okeke, the neighbor from number 47, stood behind her gate with her phone raised high. She had been recording since the shouting started, her hand trembling as she captured every moment. The kicked suitcase, the scattered metals glinting in the sun, the old soldier's broken dignity, the young man's prideful rage. She whispered to her teenage daughter beside her, unable to look away from the scene. "This is wickedness. That old man is a veteran. See his uniform, his medals on the ground. And this boy is treating him like trash." Her daughter's eyes were wide with shock and tears. "Mommy, should we help him?" "Record everything," Mrs. Okeke said quietly, her voice steady with purpose. "The world must see this. Nigeria must see what we have become." By that afternoon, the video would have 50,000 views. By evening, 500,000. By the next morning, the hashtag #RespectOurVeterans would be trending nationwide, and Desmond's face would become the symbol of ungrateful success, the poster child for a generation that had forgotten honor. Emmanuel bent slowly, painfully, gathering his scattered belongings with shaking hands. Medals in one trembling palm. Each one a story, each one earned in blood and sacrifice. The broken frame clutched to his chest, glass fragments catching light. His boots he left where they lay, too tired, too broken, too defeated to reach for them. As he turned to leave, he glanced back one final time at the mansion's white walls, at the son who had built an empire on land the father had secured. His lips moved in silent prayer, or perhaps curse, words only God could hear. "Forgive him, for he knows not what he has done." Then Chief Emmanuel Nwosu, decorated veteran of the Nigerian Army, recipient of the National Service Medal, survivor of 3 combat zones, walked away from his son's gate. Each tap of his cane against the pavement sounded like a countdown. Each step seemed to age him another year. Heaven watched in silence. The land itself remembered whose name it bore. And justice, sleeping in the soil beneath that mansion, began to wake from its long sleep. Desmond sat in his home office that evening, leather chair reclined, confidence wrapping around him like expensive cologne. Ada was in Dubai shopping. She'd sent him photos of designer bags and sunset views from the Burj Khalifa. His business partners had been calling all day to congratulate him on landing the new government construction contract worth 40 million naira. The mansion hummed with the sound of success, staff cleaning, generator purring, everything in its perfect place. Then his phone began vibrating. First 1 notification, then 10, then 100. The screen lit up like fireworks, buzzing so violently it danced across his mahogany desk. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked urgently, her usual composure cracked. "Sir, there's a video. You need to see this." Desmond's fingers moved slowly across the screen, confusion giving way to cold dread. The blood drained from his face as he watched himself. Red polo shirt blazing like a target, finger pointed like a weapon, face twisted with rage, kicking an old man's suitcase. The video caught everything in brutal clarity. Metals scattering like fallen stars, the broken frame, the elderly veteran stumbling backward, the shock on the old man's weathered face. The comments section was a battlefield of judgment. This is the man you people celebrate? Kicking a military veteran? Asterisk. See his father's medals on the ground. What has Nigeria turned into? Asterisk. I will never do business with such a heartless man. God will punish him. That old man sacrificed for this country while this boy was still in his mother's womb. Views, 847,000 and climbing. Shares, 12,000. By evening, news blogs had picked it up. Lagos businessman assaults elderly veteran father at mansion gate. Desmond's hands trembled as he scrolled through the destruction of his reputation in real time. Monday morning arrived like Judgment Day. Desmond's phone rang before sunrise. Chief Adebayo, the commissioner who had promised him the government construction contract. Desmond, I've seen the video. Sir, please, that was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Chief Adebayo's voice was ice. You kicked your own father? A decorated soldier? Do you know what the governor said this morning? He said any contractor who disrespects veterans has no place in government projects. The deal is off. But sir, we signed preliminary agreements. Find a lawyer. You're toxic now. Click. The calls came in waves after that, each one a fresh wound. His bank manager, voice professionally cold. Mr. Nwosu, a complaint has been filed by the Veteran Affairs Association. Your accounts are under investigation for land acquisition irregularities. All transactions are frozen pending review. 3 corporate clients terminated their contracts via email. No phone call, no explanation, no second chances. Just cold, clinical termination clauses cited. Then Mr. Okonkwo's text arrived, 2 words that felt like a death sentence. Come to my office. Now. Ada sat across from Desmond in her father's study, designer handbag on her lap, face a mask of cold disappointment. The woman who used to look at him with admiration now looked at him like something rotten. I thought I knew you, she said quietly. Ada, you don't understand. That man abandoned us. That man is your father. Her voice cracked, tears threatening to break through her composure. I watched the video, Desmond. I saw you kick his suitcase. I saw his medals scattered on the ground like trash. And you know what I saw most clearly? I saw who you really are. What are you saying? She pulled off her engagement ring, a 3-carat diamond Desmond had spent 3 months' profit on, and placed it on the mahogany desk between them with a soft click that sounded like a door closing forever. I'm saying I cannot marry a man who treats his own father like garbage. What will you do to me when I grow old? When I'm no longer pretty? When my body changes after carrying your children? Will you kick my things across the floor too? Ada, please. My father has something to tell you. She stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that didn't shake. And Desmond, don't call me again. She walked out, heels clicking against marble, taking with her every dream Desmond had built around their future. Mr. Okonkwo opened a brown envelope and slid documents across the desk with the care of a man handling evidence. Desmond, when I helped you acquire that land 5 years ago, I did it legally through the Lagos State Veteran Affairs Office. The land was designated for sale to support retired military officers. Yes, sir, I know. What you don't know, Mr. Okonkwo's voice turned to ice, each word deliberate as a hammer blow, is that the land was never fully transferred to you. It remained under the original owner's name, pending family clearance documentation you never provided because you never bothered to check. Desmond's hands went cold. The air in the room seemed to thin. What are you saying? The land you built your mansion on, the land your warehouses sit on, the land you've been boasting about on social media, it's registered under Chief Emmanuel Nwosu. Your father. Everything you own legally belongs to him. The room tilted. Desmond gripped the desk edge to keep from falling. That's impossible. Here's what's more impossible. Mr. Okonkwo stood, towering over Desmond like a judge at sentencing. After what you did to that man, after that video went viral, he hired a lawyer. And this morning, he transferred the entire property to the Nigerian Veteran Welfare Foundation. You have 30 days to vacate. The words hit Desmond like physical blows. His vision blurred. His chest tightened. But I built everything. I paid for. You built on land you didn't own. The law is clear. You're a tenant at best. a trespasser at worst. Desmond stumbled out of Mr. Okonkwo's office into the bright Lagos afternoon. The sun that had gleamed so beautifully on his mansion's white walls that morning now felt like the heat of judgment, pressing down on him, exposing him. His phone buzzed, a text from his lawyer. "We need to talk. Urgently." Another buzz, Jennifer, his assistant. "Sir, security at the house is asking questions. There are men here with a court order." Desmond leaned against his SUV, the trophy that suddenly felt like borrowed glory, like everything else in his life. His reflection stared back at him from the tinted window, a successful man built on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. 3 days before he appeared at Desmond's gate, Chief Emmanuel Nwosu sat in a Malu bus traveling from Kaduna to Lagos. His bones ached from the hard wooden seat. Every pothole felt like a hammer against his spine. Young passengers squeezed past him without apology, barely noticing the old soldier in faded uniform cramped by the window. In his hands, he clutched the leather briefcase, older than Desmond himself, held together by fraying stitches and stubborn hope. Inside, 20 years of letters he'd written but never got replies to. School reports he'd requested from Desmond's teachers and paid to have sent to him in distant military bases, Maiduguri, Yola, Kaduna. Drawings little Desmond had made in crayon, my daddy the soldier, with a stick figure in green holding a gun. Photographs of a young family that war and duty had scattered like seeds in the wind. Emmanuel had retired 6 months ago. The military gave him a small pension, a commendation medal, and a handshake. No fanfare, no parade, no speech from the commander. Just, "Thank you for your service, Chief. You may go home now." Home. The word felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. His wife was gone. He'd learned about her death from a fellow soldier who'd gone to Lagos on leave. By the time Emmanuel got permission to travel, she'd been buried 3 weeks. He arrived at an empty grave with wilted flowers and a neighbor's sympathetic eyes that couldn't meet his own. "Your son was very angry," the neighbor had said, voice barely above a whisper. "He said you killed her with neglect." Emmanuel had knelt at that grave for hours, explaining to the dirt why he couldn't be there, why the military wouldn't release him, why his letters and money never arrived, stolen by corrupt officers who saw soldiers' families as opportunities, lost in bureaucratic chaos where suffering had no receipt. Now, after 6 months of gathering courage like a man collecting scattered coins, he was coming to see his son, to explain, to reconnect, to perhaps, finally, be a father instead of a ghost in a photograph. What Desmond never knew, what anger and assumption had hidden from him, was the truth Emmanuel carried in his briefcase like classified documents. After his wife died, Emmanuel had gone to a military lawyer, Barrister Ugochukwu Okafor, a stern Igbo man who specialized in protecting soldiers' assets from vultures who circled military families like flies around wounds. "Chief," Barrister Okafor had said, spreading documents across his desk, "your family land in Lagos, the one your father left you, is under threat. Land grabbers have been circling it since your wife died. If you don't act, they will forge documents and sell it before you return." Emmanuel had been serving in Maiduguri then, fighting Boko Haram insurgents, sleeping in bunkers where cockroaches outnumbered soldiers, wondering if each mission would write his name on a memorial wall. "What can I do? I cannot leave my post. If I abandon duty, they will court-martial me. Give me power of attorney. Let me protect it legally, register it properly, pay the fees, secure it with the Lagos state government before the thieves do." Emmanuel signed the papers with shaking hands. The land was registered under his name, Chief Emmanuel Nwosu, with provisions that it would pass to his son upon proper documentation and reconciliation. One day, Emmanuel had told the lawyer, voice thick with longing, "When I retire, when I can finally go home, I will give this to my son properly. Not through papers signed in an office, but through peace made in a home. Father to son, the way it should be." But reconciliation requires 2 people willing to meet in the middle, and Desmond had built walls too high for letters to climb. When Mr. Okonkwo's company approached the Veteran Affairs Office 5 years ago wanting to buy portions for development, Emmanuel, still serving in Yola, had agreed on one condition. "Part of it can be sold to raise funds for veterans, but my family portion remains untouched. And if my son wants to build there, let him. Just ensure the paperwork is clean and legal. The officials agreed. They sold Mr. Okonkwo the surrounding area but kept Emmanuel's portion separate, waiting for the day father and son would sign together. When Desmond came to build, Mr. Okonkwo assumed the young man had his father's blessing. Desmond assumed Mr. Okonkwo owned everything. The truth fell between them, invisible as air, deadly as poison gas. The day after the eviction, Emmanuel collapsed at Ojalegba bus stop. A good Samaritan named Mr. Tund found him crumpled on the pavement, briefcase still clutched to his chest like a shield that had failed, tears mixing with sweat on his weathered face. "Papa, are you okay? Should I call someone?" "My son," Emmanuel whispered through cracked lips. "Call my son." But when Mr. Tund opened the briefcase looking for phone contacts, he found only ghosts, old letters, and faded photos. No phone number, just an address scribbled on yellowed paper. Number 7 Pinnacle Estate, Lekki. At General Hospital, Emmanuel lay in Ward C for indigent patients, those without money or family to claim them, where death came quietly and paperwork came late. Barrister Okafor received an alert when Emmanuel's name appeared in the hospital registry. He rushed there immediately, his driver breaking every speed limit between Victoria Island and Yaba. "Chief, what happened?" Emmanuel's voice was weak, each word an effort. "I went to see my son, Barrister. I thought perhaps time had healed things. But he hates me. He said I am nothing, that his success is his own. He kicked my medals on the ground, Barrister. Medals I earned with blood. He kicked them like rubbish." The lawyer's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. Desmond stood in his living room, the one with Italian leather couches and a chandelier imported from France, staring at the court documents in his shaking hands. The paper felt heavy, as if the words themselves carried weight that physics couldn't measure. Notice of eviction. Property, number 7 Pinnacle Estate, Lekki Phase 1. Registered owner, Chief Emmanuel Nwosu, retired. Current occupant, Mr. Desmond Nwosu, unauthorized. His lawyer, Barrister Kayamaka, sat across from him, her expression grim as a funeral director's. She'd stopped trying to offer comfort 3 sentences ago. "Desmond, this is ironclad. The land was never transferred to you. Your father retained ownership through the military land allocation scheme. Everything built on it. The mansion, the warehouses, even the staff quarters, legally belongs to him. But I paid for all of this." Desmond's voice cracked. "I built it with my money. My sweat. You built on land you didn't own. Legally, that makes you a tenant at best, a trespasser at worst. And now that your father has transferred ownership to the Veteran Foundation, they have every right to reclaim the property." Desmond's mind raced back to that morning at the gate. His father's trembling voice. "You have forgotten who you are, my son." Not a plea. A warning he'd been too proud to hear. "Can't we fight this?" Kayamaka closed her file with finality. Fight a decorated war veteran who's giving his property to homeless soldiers? After a viral video of you humiliating him? No judge in Nigeria will side with you. You'd be crucified in the press. Again, Desmond stopped going to his office. His staff whispered in corners, eyes darting away when he passed. Clients avoided his calls. Numbers that used to ring back within minutes now went straight to voicemail. The business bank account was frozen pending investigation into fraudulent property claims. Online, he had become Nigeria's favorite villain. Nigeria Today headline: "Billionaire son who disowned veteran father loses everything. Poetic justice." Blog post: "Remember Desmond Nwosu? The man who kicked his father's medals? Turns out this self-made millionaire built his empire on land daddy secured. The streets are saying, pride comes before the fall." Asterisk. Twitter thread: "I've investigated the Desmond Nwosu case. His father, Chief Emmanuel, served 25 years in the military. Fought in Liberia, Sierra Leone, battled Boko Haram. Came home to a son who called him a beggar. Meanwhile, everything Desmond owns sits on land the veteran protected. God is not asleep." Desmond sat in darkness, curtains drawn against the judgment of daylight, his phone face down on the table. He couldn't eat. Food tasted like ash. Sleep brought nightmares. His father's face, the scattered metals spinning in sunlight, the broken photograph with glass like spider webs across his father's decorated chest. Mrs. Okeke knocked on Desmond's door 3 days after the eviction notice. The sound was gentle but insistent, like conscience refusing to be ignored. He almost didn't answer. When he finally opened it, she barely recognized him. Eyes sunken into dark hollows, shirt wrinkled and stained, the arrogance that used to radiate from him gone, replaced by hollow exhaustion. "Mr. Desmond, I'm not here to judge you." "Then why are you here?" His voice was hoarse and used. "To record another video? To watch me suffer? Because I know where your father is." Desmond's heart stopped. The world narrowed to those 6 words. Is he alive?" "Barely. He's at General Hospital. Indigent ward. He collapsed after you sent him away." The words hit Desmond like physical blows, fists made of consequence and regret. I didn't mean for." "What did you mean for?" Mrs. Okeke's voice was soft but sharp as a surgeon's blade. "That man fought for this country. He protected land for you. And you threw his medals on the ground like they were trash. Like he was nothing." Desmond's legs gave way. He sank against the doorframe, sliding down until he sat on the floor of his own mansion, soon to be someone else's mansion. "He came to see you, not to beg. He came because he's old and lonely and wanted to meet his son before he died. And you know what's sad, Mr. Desmond? He still calls you my son. In his sleep at the hospital, when the nurses check on him, he whispers your name." Tears streamed down Desmond's face. The first real tears in years, not the calculated tears of business negotiations or the performative tears of wedding toasts, but tears that came from somewhere deep and broken inside him. Where is he?" "General Hospital, Ward C. But before you go, ask yourself, are you going to apologize to the man or to your guilt?" Desmond drove to the hospital in his SUV, the trophy that now felt like a curse on wheels. Every street he passed held memories that ambushed him. Computer Village, where he'd started hustling, selling phone accessories to people who looked through him like he was invisible. Emmanuel's eyes fluttered open to find his son kneeling beside his hospital bed, face buried in the thin blanket, shoulders shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. For a long moment, the old soldier said nothing. He simply watched. This man who had been a child when he last held him, now grown, broken, and finally humble. "Desmond." The voice was weak, but it cut through Desmond's crying like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for 20 years. Desmond looked up, eyes red and swollen like wounds. "Papa, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emmanuel's hand trembled as he reached out, slow, uncertain, as if testing whether touch was still allowed between them. Desmond caught it, and the shock of how light it was, how fragile, nearly broke him again. This hand that had once carried a rifle to defend a nation was now barely able to grip his son's fingers. "I thought." Desmond's voice cracked like glass under pressure. "I thought you abandoned us. Mama died calling your name, and you weren't there. I was 19, Papa. I buried her alone." "I know." Emmanuel's voice was barely a whisper. "I know, my son. The military, they didn't tell you in time? They told me 3 weeks after. I was in Liberia. Peacekeeping mission. By the time I got permission to leave, by the time I traveled back, she was already gone." Desmond's tears fell on their joined hands, hot and bitter. "I hated you. I hated you for 20 years. I know that too. But I was wrong." Desmond pulled the briefcase closer with his free hand, opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, letters addressed to him, never opened, stamps from cities that sounded like battlefields. School reports with his father's notes in fading ink. "Proud of you, son." Drawings he'd made as a child, stick figures and crayon soldiers. Photographs of birthdays Emmanuel had missed, but never forgotten. "You kept everything. A soldier away from home keeps his family in his heart. It was all I had." Desmond lifted out a bundle of yellowed envelopes. Money orders with official stamps, dates spanning 15 years. "What are these?" "Money I sent through military channels. Every month for 15 years. It never reached your mother. Stolen somewhere in the bureaucracy. I didn't know until I came home and found the receipts still in army records, but the money gone." The truth broke over Desmond like a wave he'd been running from his entire adult life. His father hadn't abandoned them. The system had swallowed the sacrifice whole, and everyone had blamed the man instead of the machine. "The land, Papa. They told me the land is yours." Emmanuel's eyes softened with something that looked like relief. "It was always for you. I registered it in my name to protect it from land grabbers. When I retired, I planned to transfer it to you properly. face to face, father to son. But when I came to your gate, I kicked you out. Desmond's voice was hollow with shame. I kicked your medals on the ground. Yes, you did. And now you've given it to the Veteran Foundation. I've lost everything. Emmanuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, with strength that surprised them both, have you? Desmond, what did you lose? Money? A mansion? Status? Everything I built. You built it on land you didn't ask about, on foundations you assumed were yours. Tell me, when you were constructing that house, did you ever wonder whose name was on the title? Desmond looked down, ashamed. No. Mr. Okonkwo helped me. I thought it was handled. You thought, but you didn't check. Because you didn't want to check. Because somewhere deep inside, you knew if you dug into the history, you might find me. And finding me meant facing the past you'd buried. The words were gentle, but they cut deeper than any insult ever had. You wanted to be a self-made man, Emmanuel continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. But nobody is self-made, Desmond. We all stand on ground someone else cleared. Your mother stood on her mother's sacrifices. You stood on your mother's faith. And both of you stood on land I fought to keep. I know that now, Papa. But it's too late. I've lost everything. Emmanuel's grip tightened, stronger than it looked, stronger than it had any right to be. Have you lost your hands? Your mind? Your ability to start again? But the mansion was built on pride, not gratitude. And pride makes a terrible foundation. It looks solid until the rains come. Now the rain has come, my son. But you are still standing. That means you can rebuild. How? Everyone hates me. The video is everywhere. My business is destroyed. Ada left me. I'm going to be homeless. Emmanuel's eyes glinted. The soldier was still in there, beneath the weakness and the hospital tubes. You think I've never lost everything? I've lost fellow soldiers, men whose names I still whisper in my prayers. I've lost years of my life to wars that most people have forgotten. I lost your mother without saying goodbye. I came home to a son who looked at me like I was garbage. And you know what? I didn't die. I'm still here. Desmond wiped his face with the back of his hand. What do I do, Papa? You start by standing up. Then you apologize, not just to me, but to yourself. You apologize to the man you were supposed to become. Then you rebuild. Not a mansion this time. Something better. What could be better? Emmanuel smiled, a sad, knowing smile that carried the weight of decades. Character. Integrity. A life that honors where you came from instead of running from it. That's a foundation no one can take away. 2 weeks later, Desmond stood outside the gates of his former mansion, now officially bearing a new sign. Chief Emmanuel Nwosu Veteran Rehabilitation Center. Workers were painting the walls fresh white, installing ramps for wheelchairs, converting what had been his master bedroom into a medical ward. His home office, where he'd once counted profits, was now an administrative center for processing veteran benefits. Desmond wore simple clothes, jeans, and a plain shirt, no designer labels, no luxury brands. He'd sold his SUV to pay off debts. He now lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Surulere, not the slums he'd escaped from, but not luxury either. It was enough. Beside him stood Emmanuel in a wheelchair, stronger now, but still fragile, like something precious that had nearly been lost forever. And beside Emmanuel stood Barrister Okafor, stern-faced but with pride in his eyes. Television cameras had gathered, not for scandal this time, but for something that felt almost like redemption. Desmond stepped up to the microphone the press had set up, his heart pounding against his ribs. My name is Desmond Nwosu. Some of you know me from a video that went viral 5 weeks ago. You watched me disrespect my father, a decorated war veteran. You watched me kick his medals on the ground. You watched me become the villain of my own story. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. Truth had weight. I'm not here to make excuses.